The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, ladies and gentlemen. So, with that being said, welcome to the very first episode of the newest show on the Off the Ball Network platform, Bunts and Bruises podcast, presented by two of the newest members here on the network, myself, Jurgen Koni, and my partner in crime, the Don, the number one contender for the Hot Take Championship at the network, my guy, James Barcia. James, how are you, my brother?
Let me tell you, man. I've been everywhere. I've been on Morning Brew with Stu. I've been on Cruise Island. I've been with Vice Prez. I've been with both Vice Prezes. We've done a whole network mock draft. It's good to call somewhere home here, Jared. Yes. I'm excited, man. We've been working on this for weeks. I don't know if you guys peeped our review of the Super Bowl. That was actually our first dry run to see if this was even going to work. And we knew right there we had something special. We're excited to give you guys this. We've been working countless hours. Let's get to it, Jared.
Absolutely. For a lot of people that, want to get into this, it takes a lot of work to get into podcasting and, to plan all the fine details. And it took us a little bit, especially on my end with scheduling and all these various things. But at the end of the day, all that matters is now we are here, we are ready to go, and we are ready to talk. But first, before we get into that, James, of course, we are with the Off the Ball Network, and we are both very happy to be part of the network. And with being part of the network, we are part of plugging stuff for the network. So, James, the network, we gained some new sponsors recently, and I want you to talk about the newest one to help support the network.
Yes, sir. We're here talking about our newest sponsor, Manscaped. And let me tell you, man, the support they brought us is awesome. They are the number one for the best men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped's offering precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over the technology developments to provide the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. Hopefully, we're going to get that viewership number one day. We have an exclusive offer for all our new listeners here. Thank you for joining us, man. We got 20% off and free shipping with promo code OTBN at manscaped.com. Man, Manscaped hooked me up with a bunch of tools and formulations. Like, they gave me the perfect package, man. That lawnmower 3.0,
it's magical.
Say no more. You know exactly what I'm talking about here, Jerk. But once again, guys, get your 20% off and free shipping. Who does not like discounts? Once again, it's promo code OTBN. That's promo code OTBN at Manscaped for your 20% and free shipping.
As you said, precision tools for the family jewels. And as our fellow friend at the network at Breaking the Game, make sure you follow them for all your NBA stuff. The best product out there. Number one for sure. And, of course, shout out to all our guys at the network supporting us tonight. And, speaking of support, James, young quarterbacks need support when they get into the league. Tell me not, right? When a young quarterback doesn't get enough support when they're in the league, it ends up being a failure with the team they're on. And eventually they end up parting ways. So with our first episode coming on tonight, how fortuitous for us to get the news that a lot of people have been waiting for. Sam Darnold finally got traded from the New York Jets after a lot of people, including personal friends of mine who are Jets fans, wondering when Joe Douglas was finally going to move him. The Jets finally trade Sam Darnold over to the Carolina Panthers for a good amount of draft picks, actually. They got, I believe it was a second and a fourth round pick for next season's draft, and then I think it's a sixth for this year. I might be mixing up the fourth and the sixth, but it's those three picks. It's a second, it's a fourth, and a sixth. I guess they went with even number picks for the heck of it. But in all seriousness, Sam Darnold finally gets traded from the Jets after 3 years there. The former top 5 pick, if I'm not mistaken, was drafted in the same draft class with Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Rosen. I guess you could say, he's not the worst of that class so far. But obviously the Jets' tenure has just not ended up the way that, the previous regime would have wanted, because obviously he was drafted by the previous regime, and also how Jets fans would have wanted with using a high draft pick on a quarterback. So at the end of the day, they deal him to Carolina, and Matt Rule will get him as their quarterback. I want to throw it to you, James. What is your instant, whether it's, gut, knee-jerk, whatever you want to call it, reaction to when you heard about this news?
Man, I felt like Sam Darnold when this news hit me. It was like an edge rusher just hit me from the blind side. I was not ready. Shout out to my man Cruz, not Cruz Vega. You guys see your hair when you do your podcast, man. But you're right. I jumped right fresh out the shower after using my lawnmower 3.0, man, and I didn't have time to hit the gel, but it's all right. But back to this Jets news, man. Last thing I was expecting was the Jets to actually trade Sam Darnold a couple weeks before the draft. I was expecting this to be a day of thing or even an into the season thing. No, I didn't expect him to last on the Jets during the offseason, but for them to make this trade, and honestly, I love it for both sides. I think Carolina, it's a good deal when both teams are looking at it like we paid a little too much or we didn't take enough. This is a great deal for the Jets, though, because like you just said, they got 3 draft picks. Yes, you wish that 2nd and 4th was for this year, but you're loading up picks for the next 2 years. I saw a stat sheet where the Jets, I believe, have, I want to say, 19 picks over the next 2 years.
Right.
And if the Jets are, which everyone's expecting them to, take Zach Wilson, that's exactly how you fix what their issue was. You take those draft picks, and if you really trust Joe Douglas to be this GM, who everyone is saying he is, he's going to build a team around Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, or whoever it may be, which is something that never happened for Sam Darnold. And honestly, they already got a lot of pieces in free agency, so he just needs to hit those draft picks, not even 90% of them. If he could at least hit half of those, he's going to have a great team. And I love this trade for Sam as well, because I've said it multiple times. I think Sam could have a great career, just not here in New York due to the pressure that would be on him mentally and due to the fact that the fans and media were just not fair here. So I love that he's in Carolina. He has arguably, not even really arguably, he has the best running back in the entire league. He's reunited with Robbie Anderson, who was his number one weapon when he actually had his best season, his rookie season. And he has DJ Moore there. And Matt Rule and Joe Brady are both just offensive geniuses who are just going to make his life easier. You got to imagine Carolina used that number 7 pick to grab Sewell or Slater, whoever may land to them. And even if not, you take a receiver. Devonta Smith or Pitts is going to be there. You're just giving him everything he didn't have when he was with the Jets. So I love it for both sides.
Yeah, to your point, I do like this for both sides, because I think when we heard that the Jets refused to trade out of the number 2 pick, considering the haul that the San Francisco 49ers gave to the Miami Dolphins to trade up, I think that just essentially clinched the fact that they were going to go after a quarterback. It was just all about a matter of time of who are they likely going to take, which a lot of the odds are pointing towards Zach Wilson being the next guy to be drafted. And where were you going to send Sam Darnold, essentially? And I think with it, I would have loved if Sam had gotten one more chance in New York. But I think to your point, I think the last 2 years of the Adam Gase tenure really threw a wrench into the system. Darnold did not look good there for a reason. I don't think a lot of quarterbacks would have looked good in that situation unless you were literally an all-time guy. And the best and Adam Gase has ever looked like when Peyton Manning was running the show. So, A plus B equals C in that equation. I would have loved to see it just because out of fairness, because I don't think he ever got a real shot to be the guy. But at the end of the day, to your point, I 100% agree. He needed a new scenario for himself. He needed to get somewhere else. He needed to get out of New York. He needed to get somewhere where the coach actually wanted him and would actually, start making the moves to try to protect him, which we'll get into that either later on or even in a future show. I think the pieces are there in Carolina. He's already going to have the top 2 skill position players he's had in his career so far before he even takes the field, because DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey are only positives for any quarterback, let alone a young quarterback, because keep this in mind. He's not even 24 years old yet. He's going to turn 24 soon. Like, this is a guy who's been in the league for 3 years, who's been learning NFL offenses and defenses for 3 years. He's not even 24 yet. Joe Burrow is 24. Like, this is a guy with experience that's young, that has 1 year left on a cheap contract. And even if he performs a little bit better, you can keep him at a value deal, which is what you need at the quarterback position in this league. So I think overall it is a massive W for the Carolina Panthers and a W for the Jets as well, even though I think Zach Wilson, or if they pick Justin Fields, whichever young quarterback they select, is going to end up in a similar situation. What I do think is going to happen is that they need to, and with it being Joe Douglas's guy, he's going to make that concerted effort to make sure he hits on these picks. Like you said, I think he just needs to hit on about half the picks or so, and mainly to protect / help Wilson, Fields, whoever it ends up being. So I think that's what it needs to be. To expect and hope that they go like 70% on their draft picks is kind of like 50-50. So I'm not going to go that far. But I think if they hit on these at least half these picks, get some more O-line help, another skill position player, maybe some defense, like whatever they feel needs to be done in the draft, that's what the Jets need to do. And same thing with Carolina. Like you said, this is a young quarterback going into a team with a top 10 pick. That's a very good situation. But as we focus on Darnold to Carolina, as we focus on the picks that the Jets get, there is an odd man out in this situation. Don't worry. We ain't forget about him. Teddy Bridgewater, who signed a 3-year contract last offseason with the Carolina Panthers. Immediately before he really is able to get into a groove, Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. Inconsistencies throughout the offense the entire year. Matt Rule being a first-year head coach, which, I mean, he did a solid job at the end of the day. But I don't think, you're talking about quarterbacks that may not have gotten a fair shake. I know he got paid, so for a lot of people, they're going to lose sympathy. But Teddy Bridgewater, at the end of the day, didn't get the full year in Carolina that we all would have expected and that he should have gotten considering what the situation looked like a year ago, especially considering they went all defense in the draft and they had at least half their starters at some point on the defensive side of things were rookies. I don't think we got a fair shake to see what that team could have looked like with Teddy Bridgewater. Now, I'm personally not going to, say that, Bridgewater is one of those guys. I'm not going to say he's that kind of guy, but I also think in the right system, in the right, team, he could have a season like a Ryan Tannehill just had. I don't personally think Tannehill is that much above Teddy Bridgewater, in my opinion, because you look at the team Tannehill's had in Tennessee, far better than what Teddy had in Carolina. So that's my thing. So, James, I want to throw this to you. What's the future of Teddy Bridgewater?
Honestly, I wouldn't put it out of question that he spends a year here in Carolina. I understand you just gave up that draft capital, but Teddy Bridgewater is a veteran's veteran. He would be someone who's actually a great mentor for Sam. And honestly, it would give you a chance to up his trade value because you're right. He didn't get a fair shake last year, and you only gave up a 6th-round pick for Sam this year. There's rumors already reporting that Carolina is expected to take Sam's 5th-year option. So you expect Bridgewater to be that bridge, no pun intended, quarterback that he was signed to be, and he could be because Bridgewater was already a mentor to Sam. Some people forget they were teammates for the Jets. So if you could up his value, all these options that the Breaking the Game pod just mentioned are perfect options for next year. Washington, Bears, Eagles. I'm sure the Saints are even keeping an eye on Teddy because they're the ones who let him go. So if it doesn't work out for Jameis or Taysom Hill, they could possibly make a trade for Teddy Bridgewater. Or my personal favorite is you can never have too many good quarterbacks. I understand there's always a quarterback controversy, but I love using the example of Teddy Bridgewater himself. When the Vikings lost Teddy Bridgewater that year, the Eagles traded Sam Bradford, and they received almost 2 first-round picks, I believe. It was something outrageous for a quarterback like Sam Bradford who should never get it. He is the biggest schemer in the NFL. That man has made the most money for playing like absolute garbage. But that's a different show for a different day.
And obviously, our guy's taking a little bit of onus of mentioning the Saints, but I think you bring up a good point. Like Teddy Bridgewater is such a nice guy. He's like the perfect, he's that pros pro you always hear about in professional sports. And I think whatever the situation ends up being, whether they keep him or they just decide to trade him outright. Although I think to your point, James, like there is value in maybe seeing if he can build up a little bit and you can even get at least a 2nd-round pick and maybe like a 4th or a 5th back for him. Like get back in a trade for him, what you essentially just gave up for your quarterback of the future. So I think there's definitely value there. And like you said, like these two know each other a little bit. They were teammates at one point, although for a brief period of time before the Jets traded Teddy to the Saints. Like there is something that could be done here. I think overall the Panthers they're in a win-win situation with Teddy. I think if you keep him, he's just going to help Sam, and if you trade him, you get a little bit of draft capital back. I at the end of the day, like there's no better situation to have. Mm-hmm. So, we're talking about, as we said, we did not expect the Sam Darnold deal to happen today. I was doing a commentary on a college baseball game while that happened, and so I was floored when I saw it. I opened our group chat for Off the Ball Network just in time when I saw it. But you're talking about unexpected deals, then things that a lot of people are going to have a lot to talk about. Jrue Holiday. So just about 24 hours ago or so, give or take, maybe 36, he received a contract extension, a very handsome payment from the Milwaukee Bucks. It was a 4-year, $160 million contract. You are hearing those numbers correctly. 4 years, $160 million to keep Jrue Holiday in the great state of Wisconsin. Cheese be the Lord and Savior. But in all seriousness, obviously the Bucks, they made an investment when they traded for Jrue Holiday. It was a big deal because of how much they gave up for him. And I think with a lot of the analysis people are, have given so far on this deal, I think a lot of people are leaving out the fact that they kind of hamstrung themselves into having to do this. No matter who they would have traded all that draft capital for. I think if this was a different player, we would probably be seeing a contract extension yet again. Maybe the deal's a little bit different depending on who it is, because Jrue Holiday at least has name value to him. But that's how it takes. I also have other ideas of why this contract extension costs so much. But James, I want to throw it to you first. I guess the generic, overpayment of underpayment, or just about right considering the situation for the Bucks.
I understand how much they gave up, which even then I thought that was an overpayment. I still believe this is an overpayment, but like you said, when it first happened, you kind of got to do it. At the same time, it's just like I feel like they're shooting themselves in the foot, because if this doesn't all work out, we've seen it before time and time again. I don't care if you got that super max with Giannis. We've seen superstars push their way out of cities or franchises because nothing's worked out. And you could call it their big three of Chris Middleton, Jrue Holiday, and nothing against Jrue Holiday. I love him as a player, but I don't think he is that extra piece that's going to take Milwaukee a step above. We've already seen it throughout this season. They are, I'll bet they're still a good team. They're playing nowhere near the level people expected them to rise once they made that trade for Jrue. So I'm happy he made his money, man, but if this doesn't work out, it's going to bite them right in the butt in a couple of years. Because look, I'll read this right now. This year they have committed, due to this, $105 million for 2020-21 to 2020-22. Next year they have $113 million. All of this is without incentives, so all these numbers are going to bump up if all three players hit their incentives. They have $113 million invested in these three players for 2022 and 2023. And 2023-2024 will be $120 million, and that's if Middleton exercises his player option, which I expect him to, because he is making, in my personal opinion, way more money than he should. But they are two good players. I just don't believe they're going to be the two players that help Giannis get up top. But you're right. This contract's all about making Giannis happy.
Right, and as our guys at Breaking the Game are saying, there's a tax to this, and I think the thing is that with contract extensions, kind of like how there's always these ads telling you to watch out for hidden fees when it comes to signing up for stuff like insurance or a credit card. There are hidden fees that come to contract extensions in sports, and this Jrue Holiday deal, I think, is one of them. I think number one is obviously the Giannis happy tax. If we are to assume that Giannis is very happy with Jrue Holiday being one of his teammates, and that Jrue Holiday has been helping on defense, he technically leads the league in steals per game because he's played more games than Jimmy Butler, who is technically averaging more per game but has played less games, then at the end of the day, it makes sense. So there's keeping Giannis happy. There's the fact that you traded all that draft capital for him. If you let him walk, then that was a waste. You traded so much, and it's essentially the entire immediate future for a guy who, if you let him go after a year, especially a year where you may not end up winning the championship, it looks even worse. And I think the biggest thing is the fact that if you let Jrue Holiday test free agency, not even fully enter it and entertain, if you let him test free agency, who's to say that a team on the level of the Bucks in a location that's maybe geographically, better than Milwaukee, all due respect, there are warmer places in the world, so all of those factors combined end up forcing the Bucks to have to give out this contract. And I've moved away from calling players overpaid or underpaid or whatever. Or, well, not underpaid. I won't say someone's not underpaid, but in terms of overpaid, I don't like saying someone's overpaid, but I will say if someone's being overvalued. And I think while Jrue Holiday is a fine player, I still think he's a pretty good player, and I think he fits a lot of needs for this team, which we'll get into in a second. I think he's slightly overvalued when you just look at the contract and equate it to the on-court production you're going to get. Now, with all the now in terms of giving him the contract, because we can differentiate here, how will his play go after the contract, and then what happened to lead to the contract? So with everything that happened, with how he's played so far, which is not too bad this season, but giving up the draft capital, needing to keep Giannis happy, potentially losing him in free agency if one of these big elite tier teams offers him a deal, then That's okay. I can see why they had to give it to him. And then now that he's being paid, let's see what happens. But I will say, in terms of what the Bucks could be, I have to agree with our guys at Breaking the Game. I still think the Bucks have a legitimate shot at the East. I don't think we could always hold past playoff failures against teams and athletes for too long. I think it becomes unfair to a certain extent. And I think with the Bucks, I think what Jrue Holiday gives them, he gives them that defensive guard that they just did not have in last season's playoffs. And it gives them a guy to penetrate the lane and help to kick it out to the shooters or help run some more pick and roll and just get the ball out of Giannis's hands overall, which I think would help, because if Giannis doesn't need to be the guy creating the offense in the half court, I think that increases his usefulness in that half court. It could potentially make him, more valuable in a half court spot, because in the playoffs, it's about the half court game, which Jrue Holiday knows the half court game. And I think that's where his value comes in. And against the Nets, where with zero interior defense, I know they got Aldridge and Blake Griffin, but let's be real. Those guys were not good defenders at their peaks. They ain't going to be good defenders now. So with Jrue Holiday and Giannis attacking the middle lane there, Jrue Holiday would help them get across the wall that Miami essentially built when guarding Giannis in last season's playoffs. Like, I think Jrue Holiday, you can't convince me he makes their chances at winning in the playoffs worse. They may not be as great in the regular season, but if I'm going to take a dip in the regular season to get better in the playoffs, I'll take it.
You're right. I'll take that 10 times out of 10. And I'm glad you actually mentioned the postseason and all the things Jrue Holiday could do, because you're right. He actually could be the missing piece. He could be that defender you need to take pressure off of Giannis, because especially a player like Giannis, he's number one in your team for the scoring, and he can't be the number one defender for your team as well, because we've seen it with Kawhi. Kawhi would take his days where either in the postseason, he's either going to be that number one defender and he'll try to help out facilitate the game, or he's going to be the number one offensive player and he's going to have PG or a different player take over. What that does for Giannis, I would like to see, because still it's all about how Giannis is going to handle that double or triple team whenever he starts driving to the post or posting up in the playoffs. If he could kick it out to Jrue and Jrue could land that shot or facilitate the ball over to Middleton or any of the other guys, it would be a great matchup. So you're right. I would give that up for the regular season, the play in the regular season, for a better postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're talking about regular season and postseason, obviously with with the NBA and, my league, the NHL, we're about a little over a month away or so from the postseason. And, the podcast being called Bunts and Bruises, don't worry. We're about to enter those parts of the conversation now, ladies and gentlemen. My guy, Jeff, I got you. I will go over what is going on in hockey very soon, my man. I promise that. But the other side of the show, the Bunts. We're talking about the regular season. Major League Baseball had their opening day, recently. And for all intensive purposes, pretty successful. They're kicking off a 162-game regular season, which I honestly wouldn't have imagined they would have even been able to pull off with how 2020 ended up. So the fact that they are able to do so right now is a big deal for the league. So I give them a W there. And, they had like an 80-something% success rate when it came to games that were actually supposed to be played on opening day. So, again, I'll give them a little bit of credit there, because all the leagues have suffered with COVID, and we'll get to that in more detail a little bit down the line. But, James, here's my thing. We've already seen some cool highlights. Shohei Ohtani absolutely slaughtered a baseball yesterday.
Oh,
I watched that clip today. It sounded like a gunshot with how that ball came off his bat. It was phenomenal. And in that same game, he threw a ball over 100 miles too, just showing he is that special. He could do both, right? Acuna had like an amazing out from the outfield where he got Bryce Harper out on a play, right? Like, again, opening day was pretty good. The Dodgers are looking pretty good so far. The Padres looking like they can maybe challenge with them. Of course, certain teams are, it's obviously just the first few games, so obviously not every team is start off to so great, but the Miami Marlins have a kid down there who stole 2 bags in a game, right? Like, all these little things that are happening in baseball, it's getting us all excited. Oh. But then the problem is that we want to talk about that, but then something else takes the spotlight. James, I'm going to throw it to you. Explain everybody what happened with the Cincinnati Reds, and I believe it was the St. Louis Cardinals, if I'm not mistaken, if I have that right.
Yes, sir, it was. And this is actually one of the best rivalries now. I hope this is about to start up just fire throughout the whole season. So just to set you guys off, yes, fireworks were happening all opening weekend, just like Jurgen said. And speaking of fireworks, Nick Castellanos was a firework this weekend. My man has been lighting it up. So to set the scene, it is the big opening series, opening day, and he just hits a bomb to start it off. It was a shot heard around the world. He was the first big home run before the Otani home run. By the way, more on the Otani home run. In the young season, he has the fastest pitch thrown so far and the hardest home run hit so far.
Look at that.
So he is the modern day Babe Ruth. It's just
and they'll still miss the playoffs.
it's just I hope not, man. I got Mike Trout. Michael Trout needs to make the playoffs. But
Agreed.
Back onto the story. So Castellanos hits this, and the Reds took a 11-6 lead on the St. Louis Cardinals. And for some reason in baseball,
keep it on.
So for some reason in baseball, it's just it. For those who don't watch baseball, there's a whole book of unwritten rules, and they're the dumbest things that are in the sport. They ruined the sport, in my personal opinion. And one of the rules is you can't really celebrate your home runs, or if you get blown out, the other team, for some reason, is allowed to beam you with a pitch. And that's exactly what happened to Nick Castellanos. Next game, he showed up his first at bat. I think I'm butchering his last name, but it's okay. He got hit with a 90-mile-per-hour fastball right in the back. And my man, he like a G, he picked the ball up off the ground. He said, "Here, you want this back?" Wait, quick sidebar. House phones still exist, Jurg? That's a thing still?
Yes. I don't know why. It's not for me. I can promise that.
So he got the ball and started jarring off at the pitcher, basically saying, "Do you want this back?" And the pitcher, back and forth happened, and he finally went to first base. So once Castellanos got to first base, I believe, I forgot how he got around the bases, but he got around the bases, and there was it was a loose ball. Loose pitch, wild pitch, went behind the catcher. Catcher throws it to the pitcher, and it was a boom, boom moment. Nick slides into home plate. He's safe. The same pitcher that beamed him wasn't able to tag him out. And it was almost like an Allen Iverson moment. When he got up, my man just flexed right over him and kept jarring more. And then just kept his stepping. And like a great catcher is supposed to do, the Hall of Famer Yadier Molina. I'm butchering all these names, guys. I apologize. I'm suffering from major allergies. I'm kind of nasally, but I'm trying my best here. Nothing stops us at Bunts and Bruises. Just some of the bruises right here. So Yadi, like a great catcher, goes all up in his face, and then all the benches clear. What a way to start opening weekend, because there is nothing in baseball like benches clearing. I will spend 30 minutes of my day watching the same clip of just people fighting, because there's just so much going on when benches are clearing. You have about almost 50 people on the field, and there's different fights everywhere. So after the dust settles a little bit, everyone's back in the benches. Next thing you know, everyone's saying go back. You look in the outfield, benches start clearing again because the relievers of each team start arguing with each other as well. So we have another benches clearing, and after another 10, 15 minutes, dust settles. So for some odd reason, Castellanos was the only player ejected from the game, and he wasn't even the one. Yes, that he showboat a little bit, of course, but this is what baseball needs. The unwritten rules don't allow Nick to flex. I don't get why. Unwritten rules don't allow baseball flips. You need to draw younger viewers. You don't need viewers like me in baseball already. We had multiple. If you look at the age demographic, it is 25 and plus is the most fans. Baseball is terrible with their marketing, and they're terrible with their player marketing, because why are we ejecting Nick for he's the only reason I was on Twitter at that moment, was to watch him hit the flex. So now, after he got ejected from the game today, it just came out that he got handed over a 2-game suspension, which is, again, another error in this game. He is, of course, going to appeal the 2-game suspension, so he will be allowed to play until he figures out what happens. Maybe he will serve it. Maybe he won't. But back to my point, I don't understand why you're allowed to get beamed, because
you are destroying a team, but you can't flex on the same guy that beat you.
Right.
What do you think about that, Jurgen?
I have had a problem with Major League Baseball unwritten rules essentially since I have began watching the game when I was younger, and I remember hearing about it. And my first thought, because I was a child when I heard about it, it's like, wait, if they're rules, why are they unwritten? So it's like, first off, the logic already doesn't make any sense, right? Like, if they're rules, write them down. Like, dumbest thing in the world. Like, I'm usually not like always a letter of the law, or like it needs to be exact definition kind of thing. But like in something like this, like you might as well have that. Like these unwritten. How many different things can we even technically say is an unwritten rule? It continues to be an issue year in and year out, but I think the last 2 years in particular have been very bad on this whole unwritten rules thing. Last season, I know you remember this, when Fernando Tatis hit a grand slam.
Beautiful.
When they were up on the Rangers. And funny enough, this usually happens to the Rangers, so congrats. This one doesn't include you, finally. Like, people actually had a problem with it to the point where Fernando Tatis had to apologize. The fact that one of the best young players in the game, one of the most electrifying young players in the game, had to apologize for hitting a grand slam. I had been against it for so long, but that was the point in time where it's like, all right, unwritten rules, they need to go forever, because it is the most ridiculous thing in the world that still exists. And now with this whole thing, so here, breakdown, because you gave the whole situation. So the pitcher throws the ball at Castellanos, right? Mm-hmm. Throws the ball at him, hits it on purpose, takes his base, goes it, and now he's doing his usual thing. I just saw a baseball game today, so base running, it's meticulous, it's all that. He slides home. You got to hustle home when it's getting close. Bang, bang, play. Safe. Against, if I'm not mistaken, James, the same pitcher that beamed him, like you said. And he gets up. So let me get this straight. You're, from the pitcher perspective, you beamed this guy on purpose. Doing so, you got a runner on base. He advanced through the bases because you kept allowing hits and other guys to get on base. And then this guy beats you to home plate. And he flexes on you because you're the one that put him on base. And yet you're mad? This is the ridiculousness in the whole culture of baseball. How are you mad that this guy one-upped you, that you let him get on base, and then he beat you to home plate? I never say... You should be ashamed as a pitcher. You had the audacity to get mad at the guy that you got on base. You are the reason that run got scored. Let's keep it 100. You are the reason why that happened. And yet you're mad. And of course, I know, like in team sports, I believe in it. Like, always stick up for your teammates. Always have your teammates back. So, like, I can't be mad necessarily at the bench is clearing. Like you said, as a man of hockey, I'm all down for a good fight. But the problem is in other sports, when fights happen, guys get suspended, guys get fined, all that. In hockey, you just go to the penalty box for 5 minutes, and then you come back out and get ready for more. But like that whole situation, it continues to rub me the wrong way. And it's another critical example of the fact of how ridiculous it is that there are quote-unquote unwritten rules, and they are treated like as something sacred, like at like a church, like when you're walking into the church, when you see the hymns and the bells and like the decorations and all that, like if Major League Baseball was a church, the unwritten rules are somewhere written on there. The problem is you don't know where to look for them. Like it is absolutely ridiculous that is the case. So that is my constant problem with it.
Yeah, the unwritten rules is just a thing made by the old heads. Let's just be honest, because you mentioned the Tatis home run last year, which is the biggest prime example in most recent history besides this fight. And that is the most beautiful example, because you're right, he did apologize. But if you were on Twitter, Facebook, MySpace even, because that's where most of the people who are upset about this thing is, it was just the older traditionalists who were upset with what Tatis did, which is what's causing these unwritten rules to be brought up more, because now we're having this young influx of players coming with the new generation of stars, and they don't care about the unwritten rules. They want to do the flash. They want to advertise themselves, and I'm all for it. This is what baseball needs. Just a prime example of why baseball doesn't understand this youth movement is for their youth development marketing. they decided to hire Ken Griffey Jr. Now, that would be a great signing if this was, 2005 maybe, or whenever it was. Now you don't need Ken Griffey Jr. Honestly, if they were smart, they would have got the moment Lindor was traded to New York. I would have been the first. He would have been the first call I made because he's actually a representative for the MLBPA. So I'm pretty sure he's almost a vice president. So your new player in the biggest market in the country, that would be the best person to lead your youth development movement. And it's just the unwritten rules make zero sense. They're holding the sport back. The traditionalists are holding the sport back. And meanwhile, we're here with the runner on second base in extra innings. There is no rule that irks me more, no new rule that irks me more than this. So you're telling me we're okay with a runner in extra innings already on, but we're not okay with extended playoffs or putting the DH spot into the NL? We're okay with seeing our pitchers get hit. None of these rules are making sense because the traditionalists, I understand, baseball is the same game it's been for 150 years now. And the traditionalist in me understands that, and I love it. Like the Yankees, they got you can't have anything more than a mustache, just no last names. I love that. But there is a certain point, man, where you just got to know you're hurting the game and you need to move on. Rob Manfred needs to just take a step back and realize these unwritten rules, these penalties, and just let the players play, man, because that's what makes the NBA and the NFL great. The NFL used to be called the no fun league. Right now, the MLB is the no fun league because at least in the NFL, they could celebrate. So it's just MLB needs to just take notes off the NBA because the NBA is the number one in player marketing and development. And it's just, there's nothing like a great baseball game. Baseball is by far, yes, the best pastime. But it's just it's going down, man. People aren't appreciating the beauty of it anymore.
Right. And, as sports fans, of course, we have our specific sports that we love and we write about for the network, but we're fans of all sports and we want to see all sports succeed. And with the fact that Major League Baseball just over the last year and a half or two, they have just been constantly failing with the PR side of things. And I know, I've heard former executives and owners talk about, like David Sampson, former Marlins executive. He's been very big at the fact a lot of guys don't care about the PR, quote unquote, the negative PR in certain situations. And I understand that. And when you have the money to control the team and when you're part of the decision-making process, I understand why you want to build a winner, quote unquote. And as our fellas at Breaking the Game have said, the last negotiations between Major League Baseball and the players were absolutely disgusting. The fact that Major League Baseball owners were the reason why the season was so truncated last year. With the fact, and it'll always blow my mind, how fans have allowed themselves to be tricked by owners overall, that they should be more closely tied to the owners than the players when it comes to contract issues, when it comes to the players union and collective bargaining. How is it that fans, predominantly the employees at your work, you're siding with the billionaire owners that if they were your boss, they would do as they do with a lot of these players and fire you instantly if they were to get someone else that could do your job at a cheaper price? It just boggles my mind how fans have allowed themselves to be tricked by the owners for so long. And Major League Baseball, I think, is the number one sport with that, because how many people, the players literally have to go on Twitch and all these platforms and say, hey, we're ready to play, right? We're ready to play and we want to play. They're keeping and also at the same time, the players got to get better with how they're handling these things. Because as we saw with the NFL collective bargaining agreement with Alvin Kamara talking about, they could have done a better job. But at the same time, at least in the NFL and the NBA, it's handled a lot better. The NHL, they had a lockout back in the mid 2000s and they've been handling their TV deals ever since. They just signed their TV deal a while back with ESPN. They're doing good. With Major League Baseball, it's going on such a downhill trend with stuff like this. With the issue with the unwritten rules, not reaching out to they have the strictest media policy too when it comes to sharing their clips and using their video on stuff. Somehow, some way, when you want to grow the game, when you want to grow your league, you're doing everything wrong to do so. And it just boggles my mind.
I'm glad you actually mentioned people being on the owner's side more than the player's side. Honestly, I'm in neither side because the players aren't making this any easier lately either. we could have had a DH, we could have had extended playoffs, but lately the players union has been holding these things as a token to try and up their negotiations. And the owners know that. The owners wanted to push the season back a month before it was supposed to start, but the players didn't want to do that, and they used excuses like they already revved up, so they want to prevent injury and all. And I understand if they were going to take a pay cut, I wouldn't want to push the season back a month either. But they were going to make 100% prorated exactly what they were going to make if they started the delayed opening. So it's just like you said, these negotiations are just disgusting because there's no middle ground anymore. We need a new union president. We need Rob Manfred to step down. There needs to be major changes in baseball because clearly it's just poison in a war field. These guys don't even care about making the game better. They just care about winning whatever the negotiation is. And it wouldn't shock me if there's a strike or some kind of stoppage in play at some point for the MLB because it's happened before. They've canceled a World Series, so it's not like it won't happen again. It's ruining the sport. Literally, I can't get enough. It's hurting me because as a baseball fan, I get why people don't want to watch it anymore because it's just literally, it doesn't have the same juice it used to have. Because as terrible as this is, during the Royd era, there was home runs everywhere, but you had your ground balls too. So on top of these unwritten rules and just terrible negotiations, you're having a terrible product. And we're eating it. So unless there's some major changes where we start writing letters to our senators, I don't know what we need to do, folks. But we need Rob Manfred and the union president to step down. We need to save baseball. We need to save it now. Now.
I can agree with that. I'm definitely all aboard of getting Rob Manfred out of the commissioner's seat. Like he just hasn't done a good job. You remember after the World Series, he was like, I can understand like being nervous sometimes, but like what was the stuttering and like just the lack of confidence in his voice presenting the World Series trophy to the Dodgers and the World Series MVP award. In like what was that? So yeah, I'm all for Manfred going out. And it's not just in Major League Baseball, by the way. Like the NFL, they need new Players Association representations with all the stuff that's been allegedly being said about how DeMaurice Smith and all of them are doing things over there. But obviously, story and show topic for another time. But before we get to a big thing real quick, because, we've been talking about money with a lot of this stuff. Francisco Lindor, big contract extension with the Mets. I know you're happy about that, obviously.
Yes.
Really quick, just my take about it. I think it was the right deal, kind of like with the whole Jrue Holiday thing. When you trade assets for a player, and especially an electrifying player like a Francisco Lindor, you need to get that guy under contract. And I think doing that, it's a goodwill gesture to a couple of things. It's a goodwill gesture to the fan base that you're serious about contending. It's an early big-time splash signing for Steve Cohen, which is something that he needs to do as a new owner. I feel like a lot of new owners typically feel this pressure. And then I think ultimately for the guys on the roster that are kind of older, like a Jacob deGrom and a Noah Syndergaard, like this is a example like, hey, we still want to win here. And maybe if you can help us contract-wise, not take massive pay cuts, but like let's make the negotiation process simple in terms of what you guys want and what we want, we could build up this team here. So I think on all ends, the Mets aced the Francisco Lindor contract situation.
I couldn't have said it any better, Jerk. I knew it was a done deal because Cohen was tweeting the whole weekend. He had him over his palatial estate, mansion, wherever it may be. They went out for dinner, and Cohen tweeted Lindor had the chicken parm. It was a done deal after that. A man doesn't order a chicken parm when he's upset. You know what I'm saying, man?
That's true.
It's just never once have I been mad when I had a chicken parm. That's all I'm saying. But the contracts, it's a little more than we want to pay. Of course, it was a little more than we want to pay. But you got to get it done. I'd rather pay the extra money with the 10 years than the 12 years, $385 million he wanted. Those 2 extra years they don't look pretty to me. And that by that time he'd be 39. No one wants to pay a 39-year-old shortstop that much money, let alone a 37, 38-year-old shortstop, $34 million, which is what we're going to do. But you're not paying him for those back years. You're paying him for what he could do. If this ends up in at least one World Series, it's worth every single penny. And Francisco is the superstar that we have not had in Queens in a very, very long time. He's just a pizzazz. He puts on the jacket from Coming to America for Instagram. He changes his hair color every day of the week. It's beautiful, man. And it's just I don't think people really appreciate how great a player he was in Cleveland. This man is arguably, in my opinion, and this was even before he came to the Mets, he is the best shortstop in the entire league.
Agreed.
Which is exactly why he wanted that extra $1 million. Because yes, Fernando Tatis is gonna be as great a superstar someday, but my man did his due time. He wanted to be the highest paid shortstop in the league, and he made sure that happened.
Absolutely. And we normally talk about this in sports like the NBA and the NFL where guys got to one up one another. Lindor literally went one up, like, all right, you got 340. I want 341 like on his contract. So I think obviously, we both make the points like he's, as you said, with him being part of the Players Association, like he's an ambassador. He's the right kind of guy that you want to be the face of your organization. He's electrifying. He's fun. He's good in the community. We've seen the promos of him giving back to his, home country and like teaching young players. Like he just does it all. Like, so well worth it, especially like I think in Major League Baseball, I think it's an understanding when you pay a player that contract, you're paying for the best years. And then you deal with the back half afterwards because what you want are those peak years where you can contend for a championship, which is eventually what the Mets should want to do with this core. So, spot on there from all angles. Good job, New York Mets. Now, I know this is not the Mets' fault, but there's a little bit of shaky stuff. So with the Lindor contract extension, came games being postponed, and essentially the main event of our first episode today, only apropos with let's talk about Major League Baseball getting all this done. COVID's still around, ladies and gentlemen, and COVID reared its ugly head at the very beginning of the Major League Baseball season. Did not waste any time, so I guess I got to give it a little bit of credit for not teasing us. A couple games were postponed on opening day. I think just 2 or 3 of them, which is like I said, it's not bad. And obviously, it's already causing early rescheduling in Major League Baseball. So, James, kind of break it down, like this early case of COVID. Is this maybe a good thing for Major League Baseball? So they're dealing with this right off the bat, and they can just have protocol and handle all this at the beginning. So they're actually much better prepared for as the season progresses.
I could tell you one thing: it's a good thing for the Mets because I saw that Phillies opening lineup, and wow, I mean the Phillies were killing it. Yes, that's what I'm saying. And thank God we're getting their back into the rotation because Zach Eflin, that guy is nice. But either way, COVID, I believe it was better happening in the beginning of the season. The question is, how is this going to work out for the rest of the season? Due to the vaccine, I believe it's going to be a lot smoother ride than it was last year when we saw the major outbreaks happening to Miami and St. Louis. They've missed a lot of games, and that really messed up the schedule. Yes, and no team wants to be delayed or postponed 3 games and be back compared to that everybody else. But with a long season like this compared to the 62-game season they had last year, you're able to have those double headers more spread out compared to where they were last year. So no one likes it, yes, but due to the vaccine being available, I think this is going to be something that's going to be far and few in between compared to last year. And I'm sure they could figure something out because in baseball, you have some of the biggest rosters, and they do have a taxi squad. I believe this was a freak incident because it was about 10 players. I'm sure it was a majority of their starting lineup, and 2 staff members were tested positive. Fingers crossed, prayers to their family. Hope everybody's all right. But once everybody's good to go, I think it's not like they aren't following the rules. Everyone's following these guidelines. It's just when you're playing 162 games and you're traveling as much as these teams are, it's bound to be a slip up somewhere. So best we could do is cross our fingers. I believe the league will be all right. They figured out how to do it last year when it was in the heart of COVID. We're coming, I would love to believe, towards the trail end. Unfortunately, well, some people will say fortunately, there was actually the opening day for the Rangers was 100% capacity. I saw the complete stadium full.
Right.
People were shoulder to shoulder like nothing was going on. Good for them if they're happy. And, I hope that Major League Baseball keeps the same spirit in mind. Just keep on pushing and going 100%.
Right. And, because it hit early on, I think like if there is one positive, as weird as it sounds to say, if there's one, ironically too, if there's one positive to take from COVID hitting early on, it is the fact that you get to use policies and implement all this stuff early. And I think to your point, like now it's going to be 162 full games, which means 81 road games. But that's not just 81 days on the road because you got to go there before. It takes maybe a day or two to get back home because there's little breaks here and there. Like it's going to be tough on these guys to have to follow these rules for a full regulated season. And, you hope for the sake of everything, like you said, we're not going to get into the discussion fully because there's so many layers to it, but the vaccine stuff, like hopefully the league start to, I don't want to say force, but maybe kind of make the guys think about getting this vaccine a little bit more. Cause I think at some point it's going to be needed with what the science is showing us and all of that. It could, but that's a discussion for the league staff. But I'm just saying, like, I think it's something that warrants discussion considering like it's been over a year now with it. Yes, it could be considered a good thing that the Rangers got 100% capacity, but at the same time, like we need to wait at least a week or so to see if that ends up being a super spreader type thing. So it's like, it's such a double-edged sword to the point where it's like, I hope Major League Baseball starts really like pushing the vaccine forward because that's at some point the vaccine needs to be like that. It's going to be that X factor, quote unquote. It's that utility player. It's that ace pitcher that's going to help teams get over the hump. But in all seriousness, yeah, it's that glue guy. But in all seriousness, like this is just something more. So it's like we hope that it doesn't get too serious. We hope that everyone's safe. We hope that all the results, are fine, and we hope that they can continue. Obviously. Now, same has to be said. It's bittersweet for this being the first hockey topic on the show, but I will get the shine next week. But the NHL had a massive COVID outbreak hit it recently. And, as my man Jeff asked for, Jeff, you ask and you shall receive, my guy. So the most recent team to have COVID issues have been the Vancouver Canucks. The last, I want to say, probably 3 to 4 games or so for the team have gotten canceled, and the rest of their games that were scheduled for the next, I think it said 5 to 7 days. I personally wish it would be 7 to 10 days, but let's just stick with the 5 to 7 day timeline. Have also been postponed. I'll say postponed because the NHL is trying to find a way to reschedule this, and this is going to be the hardest rescheduling yet. The Vancouver Canucks essentially had a COVID situation where at first it was just a handful of players, and they thought, everyone gets tested, guys will end up being negative, and it'll all be fine. But as days continued, the numbers started to go up. We went from like 4 or 5 to like 7 or 8, 9. You got in the double digits. I believe the number, I think it just hit 20 today. So 20 players and 20 players and staff with the team have tested positive for COVID-19. And the NHL released, as many details as they could about the situation. Essentially, the thing about this COVID outbreak compared to the Montreal Canadiens had like a little scare, I believe like a week or two ago, but it ended up being fine. The Dallas Stars were the hardest hit team at the very beginning of the season. The Buffalo Sabres, I think, have been a team that cost some games throughout the schedule because of COVID stuff. But ultimately, this has been the worst so far because allegedly, from everything that we have heard on the NHL side of things, this is apparently a new strand of COVID-19 that is put the Vancouver Canucks in this situation where a vast majority of the roster, including some notable star players such as Quinn Hughes and Thatcher Demko, the two of them have apparently caught it. A lot of bad symptoms right now. Guys are feeling terrible. They're throwing up. Like it is a very extreme case of COVID. So what the NHL has decided to do, and it's funny you mentioned taxi squads because the NHL actually does have taxi squads this season, but that's only about 4 or 5 guys. That's not double-digit players. So the NHL is trying to figure out what they're going to do here. So from a league perspective, you have this situation where the league is going to take all these games that are allegedly being canceled, which from everything I've read, the idea is that within 5 to 7 days, the league hopes that the situation is better for them and that they'll be able to resume playing. So if we're to assume, and hope for this, of course, obviously, just like with Major League Baseball, let's hope best case scenario in the 5 to 7 day stretch that the NHL hopes it works out, the Canucks are able to start playing games again. The league perspective is that at the end of the regular season, there's a little bit of a buffer period between the end of the regular season and the playoffs. The league is hoping that any games that would still need to be played around that time, if they matter for points in the system, because the way it works in the NHL, it's points based in the standings, 2 points for a win, 0 for a regulation loss, and then you still get a point if you lost in the overtime or a shootout. The league has days at the end of the season to where teams can play games that need to be made up if, and this is a key thing I've been seeing recently, if they matter. So the Vancouver Canucks, who are actually not too far out of the fourth and final spot in the North Division, the good old boys north of the border, if they're able to come back in 5 to 7 days and come the end of the season, if they're actually pretty close in the standings to that fourth and final spot, then those games would be played and to the best of the NHL's ability. And now this creates an entire new conversation. And I think new, I don't want to call it fear, but precautions for the league, because from what I've seen also, the NHL is reaffirming with all the teams around the league about their their COVID protocol and everything to do before games, after games, trying to make sure guys are being smart with everything. Because this is a very scary thing. Like it would be one thing if it was COVID in and of itself, and obviously that's scary. But now this allegedly being a different strand of COVID completely throws a wrench into the system. So that is what we know about the Canucks situation. From everything I've read, I don't think I've seen like a bona fide source of what the original source of it all was. Because like you kind of alluded to, James, when we were talking about baseball, we just don't know in some of these cases because these guys are out there. And it may not even be from them. It could have been a loved one who caught it, or like someone delivering food to them in their own home, and they just get unlucky. So that is the updated situation in the NHL, to the best of my knowledge of what I could give so far. And obviously, it's a very scary thing that we hope gets resolved, because at the end of the day, like with the leagues taking a big risk in every single way to go through with these seasons to begin with. Obviously, you hope that it doesn't result in negative results. Well, you'd wish negative COVID results, but obviously no negative, serious results when it comes to these guys having to deal with the disease.
Man, it's scary, man, because the last info I had, it said 16. So now that you're telling me saying over 20 people, this is just insane. And I was doing my research an hour before the show happened on this situation because I wanted the most. It's changing every day. I
saw one with 20. Like I don't think your thing is wrong.
Now.
Right. Yeah, the last one I saw, it said 20 players / personnel related to the team. And last night there was a scary issue because Dallas Stars coach Rick Bowness, he was actually pulled from the game due to COVID protocols. So, and the Dallas Stars already had a COVID outbreak at the very beginning of the season. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think teams are not sure. The Stars are not certain what the situation is like at the moment, because Bowness, from what I read, he actually has received the COVID vaccination. So, maybe it could just be a false, or maybe it was someone he was close to. That situation in itself needs to be sorted out. So we're going to keep close tabs on that. But right now with the Canucks situation, like as you said, it's high up there, man. And you just hope that these guys are able to get through it, because like it's one thing with all the stuff that's been spoken about COVID, but like these guys, they're experiencing the worst of the worst symptoms right now.
That's what makes it scary, man, because yes, these guys they're in shape. They're some of the best, most fit players and people out there in the world. But when you hear people like Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, Freddie Freeman last year, first baseman for Atlanta Braves, actually said he thought he was seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So no matter how in shape you are, you still will feel these things. And you got to wonder, is this going to harm the Canucks going into the postseason or towards the end of the season? Because yes, like you said, they do have those makeup games that may be important games. You got to wonder what's going to happen after that, because when we've seen the small sample size we've seen from other sports, there is no confirmation that you're going to get the same player. So you got to wonder, with the NHL trade deadline coming up within the next couple weeks, are the Canucks going to make a move to get somebody they know they could trust? Not saying that they can't trust their current players, but just someone who is coming from the outside, who hasn't been affected by this new strand or variant, because we don't even know what this thing does. This thing's coming from Brazil or something like that. I don't have all the info. I'm not a doctor, but it's scary stuff, man. And you got to pray and hope for the best for this NHL team.
Absolutely. And my thing is, if this was one or two players in particular on this Vancouver Canucks team that was dealing with this, then I think you could probably argue that they could make a move. But because the number is in the double digits, I think this almost essentially disqualifies the Canucks from the trade deadline, because I don't think there's a singular move they could make. Now, could they still make a move? Potentially. They do have draft picks. Maybe if there's a player they think they could just get for like a 4th and a 6th or something, I could maybe see that happening. But in terms of a move of any of the players on their roster, not really. And if you want to try to go after a player of some merit in the league, it's probably going to cost you something from whatever is left of your current team. And I think the point you bring up is like, we have no idea. You know, we hear that Jason Tatum is having issues with COVID. We saw that, and we fully believe that Cam Newton was highly negatively affected by COVID back in the NFL's 2020 season. But then we see guys like Lamar Jackson and other players, you know, doing relatively fine with it. And then Jimmy Butler in the NBA, like, you know, maybe there are times where he could be a little bit tired, but he has done it all for Miami and helping them, you know, rise up the standings. And Miami themselves, they had so many COVID issues in the NBA this season. So at the end of the day, like, I just don't see a path where the Vancouver Canucks, where this is easy for them to deal with in the short term. And like you said, like in that long term, like, what are all these guys going to look like? What are Sutter and Roussel and Quinn Hughes and Demko, what are they all going to look like when they come back, whenever they get cleared, right? And how long is it going to take to get cleared? Because with this being a different strand, like, I assume maybe you can't just go with the first negative you see and say, okay, you're cool. I would assume you probably need like 2, 3, 4 negatives before you're fully okay, given the thumbs up. So it's a complicated situation for the NHL to deal with. Obviously, they're going to keep chugging along. And like you said, with the trade deadline next week, where obviously I believe the trade deadline will have passed when we record. So, you know, we'll dive into that next week in more detail of what happens. I hope a couple certain moves happen for certain teams. But at the end of the day, for Vancouver, it really sucks to see for them, because they were playing, you know, some better hockey in the month of March. And maybe they could have made like a big push in April, especially with the bottom of the division, because, you know, it's wide open, that 4th spot. In every single division in the NHL, the 4th spot is wide open. So, you know, they could have made a run, they could have made a shot, but after this, like, you feel for the players on a professional level, because this now costs them from competing for that. But now you shift to the personal side, where it's like, you just hope these guys get through this, because it's like them suffering through this, it's hard to hear about.
Yeah, man, you don't wish this kind of stuff on your worst enemy. And not only the players, you got a couple older, like you said, you got coaches there too. So you got to worry about these coaches, because they're not these top shape athletes like the rest of these players are. They're up there in age too. So those are the people you worry about when it comes to these COVID situations. So, I mean, yeah, Vancouver, they got the worst hand handed to them. But right now, hockey is secondary. You just hope all these people and their families end up all right.
Exactly. And so just like with baseball, while it seems that all that's going to be handled, you hope that everything's fine. And same exact thing with hockey. You hope that all the cases with the Canucks and any other minor ones we may have heard of the last 24 to 48 hours, you hope everything gets handled. Because at the end of the day, like you said, sports is secondary and all this. Like, a lot of people have relied on it for an escape. And while I myself have my strong feelings and my love of sports, ain't nothing worth more than a human life. And that's the most important thing at this moment in time. But with that being said, that draws us to the end of the very first episode of the Bunts and Bruises podcast. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This was something that me and James, we've been very excited about, dating back to our Super Bowl preview show that we did. And we've been excited. We've been waiting. We've been talking about it. We've been, subtly promoting it. James is the master of promoting every single time he was on. And it was just absolutely electric every single time. So at the end of the day, we want to thank every single one of you for joining us. This was absolutely awesome. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors on this episode, just like they are sponsoring every single show on the Off the Ball Network. Our guys at Manscaped, like James said, if you go to Manscaped.com or go to offtheballnetwork.com and go to our sponsors and click Manscaped, if you enter the promo code OTBN, you get 20% off and free shipping. James, you convinced me there's a better deal than 20% off and free shipping.
I don't know it, man. I can't find it anywhere. That's nothing's better than that. Free shipping alone. You got me. You're throwing 20% on top of that. Woo! Forget about it.
It's absolute perfection, and perfection is only right because Manscaped themselves is perfection. I've never had an issue with it. Manscaped is the best. James, I know you. We got to make sure, as guys, you got to make sure that everything gets off the ball, and at the end of the day, you got to make sure everything's clean, concise, because you got to cut the grass for the trees to look a lot taller. And so Manscaped in and of itself is the perfect brand to treat yourself and help the family jewels. But at the end of the day, thank you all for joining us. James, let the people know where they find you, my guy.
You guys follow me at Bunts and Bruises right here every Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But follow me at Twitter at Bars Talks. I don't even got to shout you out anymore, Jurgen. Every time we here now. That's it, man. We made it. Can't wait.
Yes.
Week 2.
Yes, we have arrived, ladies and gentlemen, and we are so very thankful. And I got to shout out all of our guys at Off the Ball Network. President Chris LeBron, VPs Mo, Jeff, Steven, Cruz. Shout out to Cruz. Like, it's not in the top corner in this show, but if you look on social media and on shows going further, our show logo will be in the corner. Cruz did a phenomenal job with it, so we're very thankful for him. And we are thankful for everyone at the network who has supported us since the both of us have joined, because we're two of the newer members, like I mentioned. And they've been real to us. They've been absolutely awesome. And I cannot think of a better group of people to be a part of and a better group of people to show my appreciation towards than our guys at Off the Ball Network. So make sure you go to offtheballnetwork.com for all the amazing written work that's done by all of our various writers and all the amazing podcasts associated with the network that you are going to find. I myself, you can find me at JurgK40 on IG and Twitter for all my stuff, especially my hockey takes with the trade deadline coming up. I'm excited. And newest week of the NHL Power Rankings came out tonight. So there's that. There's that for all my hockey fans. And, of course, James, our baseball guy, it's in the lab, but we got some stuff cooking up soon there too.
Okay.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us on our introductory episode. And like James alluded to, we will see you guys next week for round 2 as we look forward to and hope for some big news coming next week. So thank you all for joining us.
Can't wait.